to the Prophecy Club. I've got Bill Federer on with us today. He ran for U.S. House of Representatives 3 times. He's a best-selling author, matter of fact, author of 18 books, speaks in over 100 cities a year. He hosts a daily radio and TV program. Bill, welcome to the Prophecy Club.
Stan, great to be with you.
Actually, I ought to say welcome back to the Prophecy Club because I had you on about 6-9 months ago, as you recall, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. It's always an honor.
You're going to be speaking October 6th on a Saturday, and the times are going to be 11-1, 2-4, and 5-7 p.m. And then afterwards, we're going to be making a 30-minute TV program. You folks are welcome to stay behind and watch that if you'd like. Anyway, he's going to be talking on 3 topics: change to chains, which is what we're about to talk about, Islamic conquest, past and present, and 32 miracles in American history. So, Bill, tell us about change to chains.
Well, Stan, one of the things I found fascinating was the statement people say America is the greatest country in the world, and I decided to prove it. So I spent about a year researching every civilization that has ever existed on planet Earth and found some very interesting things. The first thing was the first human records appear about 3,000 or 4,000 BC. What I mean by human records, human beings writing down human records. I was recently in the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, and they have the Ishtar Gate that they moved all the way over from Babylon. They have the Temple of Pergamum from that city there in Greece, and so they have this ancient cuneiform, these cylinder tablets or cylinder, markings on clay that were baked, and they are the oldest human records. And they say right there on the museum wall that writing was invented around 3000 BC. Egyptian hieroglyphics and Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets. And so 3000 BC, we're 2080, that's around 5,000 years, and there's evidence, obviously, of cities before that, maybe 1,000 years worth, so you round that out, that's 6,000 years. Now, if you were to overlay that over biblical chronology, the first 1,000 years would have been the time before the flood. And then the flood, they get off, and that's when the writing is called the Bronze Age, when they began to make farm implements out of bronze, and then they started killing each other, and so they made weapons out of bronze, and then they gravitated from the farms into the cities. And there's the king of Uruk, who was Gilgamesh, and the first story ever written in any language is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Written about 2500 BC, and this guy, Gilgamesh, goes on this long, long journey to meet this old guy who survived a global flood. That's right, this old guy had made a boat, covered it with tar and pitch, put animals in it, and then it repopulated the world out of it. That story was written in the Epic of Gilgamesh 1,000 years before Moses. Matter of fact, there are over 140 ancient civilizations that have flood stories and flood legends that in their distant past the world was covered with water. Gee, isn't that a coincidence that these secular records would be the same as what the Bible says? That
Amazing.
The world was covered with water.
Amazing.
Anyway, so as we track through history, 4,000 BC, 2080, 6,000 years, that's really not that long. 6,000 years is just 60 people living 100 years each back to back. 60 people living 100 years each back to back. I mean, everybody's met somebody that's lived 100 years or close to it, maybe a grandma, right? We're talking 60 grandmas. One dies, another's born. You do that 60 times, you are all the way back to the beginning of recorded human history. And matter of fact, just to give you some quotes to show how this is a similar time period. Franklin Roosevelt in 1940 said, "I knew that someday Russia would return to religion for the simple reason that 5,000 years of recorded history have proven that mankind has always believed in God in spite of the many abortive attempts to exile God." So here's Franklin Roosevelt saying 5,000 years of recorded history. And here is Daniel Webster. He said, "Miracles do not cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Hold on to the Constitution, for if the American Constitution should fail, there will be anarchy throughout the world." Now, Daniel Webster thought something really special happened with our Constitution. And lo and behold, when you look over this 6,000 years of world history, you see something that keeps repeating itself. And what is that? Well, is that power gravitates into the hands of one person. And now we call this one person by different names. Caesars, caliphs, chairmen, chieftains, communist dictators, czars, despotes, doges, emirs, emperors, grand mughals, grand secretaries, presidents, kaisers, khans, kings, maharajas, pashas, pharaohs, regents, satraps, shoguns, sheiks, sultans, czars. The name changes, but the function remains the same. One person calls the shots. And, just to show you another quote of how unique this is, James Wilson signed the Declaration and the Constitution. He was appointed by George Washington to the Supreme Court. And James Wilson said, after a period of 6,000 years since creation, the United States exhibit to the world the first instance of a nation assembling voluntarily and deciding that system of government under which they and their posterity should live. And, it's sort of like the Lord of the Rings. Remember that movie, everybody wanted that ring of power? And so J.R.R. Tolkien writes in the book, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. And I love the one line in the movie where Gandalf tells Frodo, he says, always remember, Frodo, the ring is trying to get back to its master. It wants to be found. In other words, power wants to concentrate. It wants to get into the hands of one person. It's sort of like the law of gravity. The lesser mass is attracted to the greater mass, sort of like the pull of a magnet. I believe it goes all the way back to the fall in the garden and selfishness coming into the human DNA and Cain killing Abel. And so you put a bunch of babies in a crib. One of them will wind up taking the rattle from the others. You put some kids on a playground. One of them will wind up being the bully hogging the ball. You put some natives in the woods, one of them will wind up being the Indian chief. And you put some people in an inner city, one of them winds up being the gang leader. And all a king is really just a glorified gang leader, And so, since this is the norm, we see a phenomenon. If you are friends with the king, you are more equal. If you are not friends with the king, you are less equal. And if you're an enemy of the king, you're dead. It's called treason. So for most of world history, equality was how close of an orbit can you get to this really important person, the king. Now, we have they get off the ark, they go and they have these farms, and then they start killing each other, so they gravitate into cities. And what happens when people gravitate together? Well, let's see, they compare themselves to each other, and some person ends up dressing a little more stylish, so everybody wants to be like that person, and that person might be a little more bossy, starts telling everybody else what to do, and then one of the things I found fascinating in these studies of ancient civilizations was three things kept coming up. Number one, they all had a fascination with the stars, the heavens. Egyptian astronomers, Persian astronomers, Chinese astronomers. Two, they would build buildings and structures to observe the stars in the heavens. Stonehenge, Cahokia mounds, pyramids, ziggurats. And three, somebody that got to climb up this building and claimed they were the divinely appointed political intermediary between the heavens and the people. Hey, God chose me to be the king of this city, and guess what? I'm going to kill people. I'm going to drag somebody up to the top of this temple and rip their heart out, and so everybody would obey this guy, and he would claim that I'm more special than all the rest of you because I'm your connection to the heavens, to God, I hear. And so this would set up these totalitarian dictatorships. And so, if you look through history, the Babylonian and Assyrian kings were king priests. The Egyptian pharaohs claimed to be the son of the god Osiris. The Roman emperors claimed to be divine. The august, the word august means divine, Caesars, right? Julius Caesar made the cult of Julius Caesar, made himself the high priest, Mark Antony his high priest. Chinese emperors ruled by claiming they had a mandate from heaven. Incan emperors in Peru, they claimed to be delegates of the sun god. Muhammad claimed to be the prophet of Allah. Indian rajas were worshipped as semi-divine. And then when Europe became Christian, they called it the divine right of kings. God chose me to be the king, so whatever my will is must be God's will because he put me here. Japanese emperors claimed to be divine. You couldn't even look at their face, right? And then there was the French Revolution. And there was this replacing the religion with the cult of the goddess of reason. And a guy named Hegel said the state is God walking on earth. And Hobbes said the state is our mortal God. And Friedrich said give the government a halo equivalent to the church. And so now they're saying, okay, the state is divine, and if you're a leader of the state, you're extra special. And so Hegel said that he didn't believe in eternal life, and he said that the closest you can get to eternal life is to create something that will exist after you're dead. And he said the greatest thing you can create is a government. And so he says the highest expression of humanity is to create a government. And so, your purpose is big government. So the government takes on this eternal perspective. So people live and die, but they're supporting this big government. So now the government's eternal. And so this is Hegel. So it's the idea that if you're a leader of the government, you are more special than all these common people. And so this hierarchy is what is in all these pagan cultures. Now, what about Israel? Moses went to the top of the mountain. Moses met with God. Moses came down with a law. But the law Moses came down with was radically different than every other nation. The law he had said the king was equal to the people, and the king had to make a copy of the law and read it every day so he would not think of himself more highly than his brethren. Every now and then a king thought he was special and got uppity, and a prophet came along and rebuked him. And you think, well, here you read Hammurabi's code, and it's got, there's the king and the royal class, and then there's the people, and then there's the slaves, right? Well, here, there is no special class in Israel. If there would have been, it would have been Aaron, the high priest, and his sons and family. Well, his sons offered unholy fire before the Lord, and fire came out from the altar and zapped them and burnt them to death. And God is saying, okay, not even Aaron gets a special treatment. He has to obey my law. And then Moses himself, he struck the rock rather than speaking to it to have water come out. The Lord told him to speak to the rock. And God says, Moses, okay, you don't get to go into the promised land because you did not obey me. I mean, if God would have made up that religion, Moses would have gone in on a red carpet. But he had to obey God's word. And so in Israel, we see this phenomenon that there was no king for 200 years in Israel. Everybody was ruled by the law. They were equal before the law, no matter how rich, how poor, whether they were from a prominent family or an unknown family, or they're a stranger living amongst them. Everybody was equal before this law. And this law said that people were made in the image of the Creator. Now, you read Marduk and his Hammurabi's code, there's no idea that you're made in the image of the Creator. None of these other ones say that. So Israel has something special that Moses came down with, and that idea of people being made in the image of the Creator is the beginning of the concept of equality, that you are equal before the law because you're equal before the Creator. This is revolutionary, and it stands out like a blinding light when you observe these 6,000 years of history. And for most of it, equality was you're more equal if you're friends with the king, and if you're less equal if you're not a friend, then you're dead if you're an enemy. New Testament Christianity is the ultimate pulling of the rug out from underneath of kings. Because New Testament Christianity says everybody gets their own relationship with God, with heaven, so we don't need some politically appointed, divine monarch to be our go-between. And so that was the ultimate expression that was in America. And this idea that the people are the ones who get the rights from God, and the people choose from amongst themselves the leaders. So I keep coming back to it in my presentation, but, one side of the page is the pagan typical idea of God gives his power to the king and the king gives the power to the people, whereas what was seen in the New Testament concept is that God gives the power to the people and the people choose the leaders from amongst themselves. So we see this development taking place over history. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I can see why as we fall away from Christ, we begin to walk into bondage and the power begins to centralize, just like Obama recently passing this law, which was held unconstitutional, but now he's trying to get it passed again, that says basically he can arrest and detain anyone he wants to for no particular reason and hold them as long as he wants to. Okay, so that's exactly going in the wrong direction. That's going in the way that it used to be when we left Britain, right?
You're exactly right. The King of England was the king of the most powerful empire that planet Earth had ever seen. 13 million square miles, 500 million people, all controlled basically by one guy, the king. I mean, yes, there was a parliament, there was some restrictions, but he ultimately called the shots. And so America's founders did not like that arrangement. They wanted to get as far away from a king as possible. But I'm going to touch on that theme in a minute. But so if we take a piece of paper and draw a line down the center, one side of the page is this old idea that there is this king, and your identity, your worth as a person, is how well you can support the agenda of the king and his state, his government. There's group rights. There's no individual rights. Well, Israel, when there is no king to butter up next to, and there's this impersonal law that everybody's equal before, this is the beginning of the concept of you having a worth as an individual, irregardless of your relationship with any important person. And so we see this concept of equality, this concept of the individual can be traced through Western tradition all the way back to Israel, all the way back to the law. Now here's Harry S. Truman. He said in 1946, dictatorship is founded on the doctrine that the individual amounts to nothing. The state is the only thing that counts, that men, women, children were put on earth solely for the purpose of serving the state. Well, when power is concentrated into the hands of the king, the state is supreme. When power is separated, it's put into the hands of the people, well, the individual is supreme. So America's founders wanted to maximize the individual. I love the quote from King Louis XIV. He was the Sun King, one of the most powerful men in the world, and he said, I am the state. In my person, I am the state. I said, I'm all of it. I mean, start talking about total concentrated power. So when I speak in schools, I have the kids hold up a fist in one hand and say, concentrated power, and then I hold up an open palm in the other hand and I say separated power. And so I said, for most of world history, power is concentrated into the hands of the kings, pharaohs, Caesars, Kaisers, sultans, czars. Every now and then there is this very rare opportunity that some people get to experiment in ruling themselves without a king. They separate the power like the fingers apart on a hand. But in times of crises, the rubber band snaps back and power goes back into the hands of a dictator. Now, Lord Acton, a British statesman, said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when power concentrates into the hands of the dictator, it's corrupt. Now, it's sort of hard to picture the word corruption. So let's use a similar word, favoritism. And so here's the king. The temptation is, hey, he's going to, have favorites. He's going to have people he likes more. He's going to have friends and family. And let's say that you get to the chance to be the dictator. And you think, you know what, I'm going to be just the absolute best. I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be good. Well, let's say that you are, and then you have a sister that has a teenage son that hangs around some wrong kids. They talk him into drinking and driving, and he runs over somebody and kills him. And now this teenage nephew of yours is facing the death penalty. And the sister comes begging to you and says, you're not going to let my little Johnny get killed. It wasn't his fault. These other kids, they did this. What's the temptation for you to do? It's to say, well, I'll let him off the hook this time, but don't let it happen again. As soon as you do that, you are the corrupt dictator. You are saying, if you're my friends and family, you get favoritism, you get special treatment, and everybody else does it. And so it's inevitable. Whenever there's a dictator, there will be favoritism, there will be corruption. The only way to get around that is to not have a king and to have everybody equal before the law. And so it's a scale of virtue. One side is total government, and it's favoritism and corrupt. The other side is no government, and in order to prevent it from devolving into anarchy, the people need lots of virtue, lots of morality. And so we see if you're going to have a government without a king, the mass of the populace needs to have lots of virtue and morality. But when they give up the virtue and morality, they give in to their passions and lusts, and there's more and more crime, and the people say, government step in to stop the crime. The government steps in, they concentrate power, and then pretty soon it's just so concentrated, it's back to the playing favorites with the person that's in. And if you're friends with the president, You get an Obamacare waiver, and if your name's Soros, you get $2 billion to drill off Brazil. If you're not a friend of the president, you get your car dealership shut down and your Gibson guitar factory raided. And if you're an enemy of the president, you get audited and the EPA comes after you. And so we're moving back in the direction of this favoritism or this corruption. So power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And Calvin Coolidge, 1924, said the history of government on this earth has been almost entirely a history of rule of force held in the hands of a few. Under our Constitution, America committed itself to power in the hands of the people. Ronald Reagan, 1961, stated, "In this country of ours took place the greatest revolution that has ever taken place in the world's history. Every other revolution simply exchanged one set of rulers for another." I don't know if I shared this quote, but James Wilson, it's worth repeating, he's signed the Declaration and the Constitution, and he was appointed by George Washington to the Supreme Court. James Wilson said, "After a period of 6,000 years since creation, the United States exhibit to the world the first instance of a nation assembling voluntarily and deciding that system of government under which they and their posterity should live." Something really special happened in America. We have inherited it, and we're letting it slip through our fingers like sand because we don't know this history. John Adams, in 1765, wrote a dissertation on canon and feudal law. He said, "I always consider the settlement of America with reverence and wonder as the opening of a grand scene and design in providence for the illumination of the ignorant and the emancipation of the slavish part of mankind over all the earth." He thought something really special happened in America. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, said, "The Americans are the first people whom heaven has favored with an opportunity of choosing the forms of government under which they should live. All other constitutions have derived their existence from violence or accidental circumstances." So we see the default setting for human government is monarchy. You buy a new computer, it's got default settings, it's already preset to something. Well, human DNA, the default setting that's preset, all the way back to the sin in the Garden of Eden, is this power corrupts, and then some selfish person ends up becoming the dictator.
Folks, he's going to be speaking October the 6th, and that's a Saturday. And he's going to be making 3 DVDs. The first one is on change to change, the things he's talking about right now, change to chains. And the second one is Islamic conquest, past and present. And the last one is 32 miracles in American history. He's going to be speaking from 11 to 1, 2 to 4, and from 5 to 7. And the suggested gift at the door is $10 per talk or $20 for all day long if you'd like to stay the entire day. Tell us a little bit about each of those 3 topics you're going to be talking on.
Well, Islam. There's been 1,400 years of Islam, and we can learn from history. In other words, past behavior is the best indicator of future performance. If I'm going to pitch a stock, you'll listen, then check out the track record. Well, if I'm going to pitch a religion, and say it's peaceful, you're going to check out the track record. Well, we happen to have 1,400 years. Muhammad was a religious leader, became a political leader, became a military leader, and fought in 66 battles, and even used the catapult when he attacked the city called Al-Taif. When he was told the catapult was killing women and children, his response was, "They are among them." Those that want to follow Muhammad's example, his life is the sunnah, the way, the example. They follow him religiously, and then politically, and then militarily. So we're wondering why all these fundamental Muslims get involved in violence. They're following the example of their prophet. I send out a daily email of something that happened on each state in history. Well, my wife picked out 32 of the best of them, and we turned it into this book and this presentation, and it is amazing when you see these times in the past when America was in hopeless crises, and the leaders called for days of fasting and prayer, and then they stood up with courage, and then things turned around. These are stories during the French and Indian War, the Revolution, and War of 1812, and a cholera epidemic in 1849, and the Civil War. And you won't be the same. Tremendous eye-opening experience to the big picture. Jesus said that you see the signs of the weather, but you can't tell the signs of the times. He wants us to know the signs of the times.
So we're going to have Bill in the next broadcast as well. I want to encourage you to come and hear him, but I also want to encourage you to get the DVDs. Now, there's 3 DVDs. Each DVD is a gift of $30 or more, or you can get all 3 of them for $50. Or the best deal is to get all of the DVDs from October 5th through the 9th, and also including Michael Boldana and everything. There's like 8 DVDs valued at $240. We're making all of those available for a gift of just $150. All brand new DVDs, 2.5 hours. As a matter of fact, I think that we're going to be having them made in HD with new cameras, so we will see how that all works out. But anyway, 8 DVDs valued at $240, all available for a gift of just $150. Call 785-266-1112, or you can order them online at prophecyclub.com. prophecyclub.com or online, or call 785-266-1112, and you want to ask for the October Speaker Package, or the Bill Federer DVDs. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for your prayers and your gifts of support. God bless. Now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. The Prophecy Club is having some awesome speakers in October. Friday, October the 5th, is Shane Warren speaking on the storm, judgment, and revival. He says he heard God say, "They divided my land, now I will divide their land." He was also told the dollar will die, major riots will occur all across America, people will demand their entitlements, and he was told that America's judgment arrives in 2020. Saturday, October 6th, it's Bill Federer, 3 DVDs on that Saturday, 11 to 1, 2 to 4, and 5 to 7 p.m. First DVD, Change to Chains, the 600-year quest for global control. Then Islamic conquest, past and present, Muslims' plans for the future. Then 32 miracles in American history. Then Sunday morning, October 7th, Bill Federer will minister at 9:30 and Bree Keaton will minister at 10:30 at the Spirit of Prophecy Church. Monday evening, October the 8th, Bree Keaton speaking on Rescue Pygmies. God said, go find the pygmies. So a fair-skinned blonde woman went to the deepest, darkest, most dangerous parts of the Congo jungle and found pygmies. She found that they were being eaten by the rebels as food. She will tell some amazing stories of how God allowed her to lead some 45,000 pygmies to the Lord Jesus, and the supernatural protection He gave her in the process. Tuesday evening, October the 9th, Maurice Sklar will speak on Revelations for the Midnight Hour. He was a child prodigy with the violin, and in 1985, God began to show him visions of the future. He will share 10 visions of America's fall and the end times. Some of his noted prophecies are, the dollar will lose 30% more and then totally die. All U.S. wealth will be lost overnight. The bride is not ready. Many in the church will awaken and return to Christ. There will be massive riots across America. Many nations will attack Israel. Nukes will be used. Revival will come to the U.S. There will be cities of refuge. Israel will win World War III and get back all of her land, and masses will move to Israel, and the internet will grow evil and oppressive. Friday evening, October the 26th, Daniel Davis will speak on I Saw the Dollar Dead. He is a missionary to Costa Rica and had a 3-part dream. He was shown the death of the dollar and its global impact. All property lines will be dissolved. He was shown the rise of the one world government and the following currency and Agenda 21 being implemented. He was told that communism is actually our greatest enemy. He was shown a multi-headed, multi-crowned dragon will arise. Saturday evening, October 27th, Michael Boldea will speak on the suffering or the glory. Michael is the grandson of Dimitri Duduman, the Romanian pastor that was put on the electric chair twice. And then later, God showed him that the Russians will attack and defeat America with nuclear weapons in one day following an internal revolution. The same angel that spoke to Dimitri now comes to Michael, and Michael says if we focus on the suffering, we will miss on the glory. And the only way to get the glory is through the suffering. He will cover everything from what we expect to see in the physical as well as in the spiritual, to the coming persecution, and he's going to discuss the hot topic of pre, mid, and post-tribulation, and why going through the tribulation ought not to be the thing believers should fear. He says blood will be on the streets in America before the end of 2012. The meetings are at the Spirit of Prophecy Church, 2540 K Avenue, Suite 100 in Plano. That's on the corner of Park and K in Plano. Doors open at 6, speaking from 7 to 10:30. Suggested gift at the door, $10 per person. There's a $10 suggested gift at the door for each talk, or you can come to all of them for a $50 donation. That's October 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And then Friday, October 26th, and Saturday, October 27th. You can go to prophecyclub.com for more details. The DVD for each speaker is available for a gift of just $30, or you can get all 8 talks valued at $240 for a gift to the ministry of just $150. Call 785-266-1112 to order your DVDs now. That's at the Spirit of Prophecy Church on the corner of Park and K in Plano. Doors open at 6, speaking from 7 to 10:30. See you there!